The soft hum of city traffic filtered through the window of my midtown office, but I barely heard it. My attention was fixed on the resignation letter in my hand, the ink of my signature still drying. My name, Samantha Reynolds, looked so final, so deliberate on that thick ivory paper. After 14 years at Reynolds & Co., the family tech firm my grandfather founded and my father expanded, I was done. I was walking away from the empire. My older brother, Harrison, was being groomed to run, and nobody saw it coming. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, once a symbol of hard-earned achievement, now just another gilded cage. I had been the Chief Innovation Officer for the past 5 years, an ironic title considering my every proposal was shot down in board meetings dominated by my father's old school allies and Harrison's cronies. Miss Reynolds, my assistant, Claire peeked in, her voice low. The board's ready. She had been with me through every battle, every pitch rejected, every sideways glance from executives who thought I was just the supportive sister. She gave me a tight smile, knowing exactly what this moment meant. I took a deep breath, grabbed the envelope, and walked toward the room that had shaped and silenced me for over a decade. The boardroom hadn't changed in 30 years. Dark mahogany, heavy leather chairs, and a looming oil portrait of my grandfather, Charles Reynolds, watching over us all. A dozen eyes turned toward me as I entered, but only 3 mattered: my father's stern gaze, my brother's smug expression, and my mother's distant calm. Samantha, my father began before I sat down. We've reviewed your proposal. You must understand how unrealistic it is. I didn't sit. It's not unrealistic, Dad. It's necessary. The tech landscape is evolving. We can't keep ignoring cloud scalability, AI integration, and automation. We need a real transformation. Harrison chuckled, tipping back in the chair that used to be my grandfather's. You mean your little sandbox projects? This company's built on legacy infrastructure. That's what clients trust. That legacy is costing us market share. I shot back. We've lost 3 major contracts in the last 2 quarters. Our competitors are adapting. We're not. That's enough. My father snapped. You don't understand what this company needs. I looked around the room, pausing on each face some familiar since childhood. You think the way we've always done things will always work. That's why we're falling behind. Silence. No one dared challenge Richard Reynolds. Then you leave me no choice, I said calmly. I placed my resignation letter in the center of the table. Effective immediately. Murmurs rippled around the room. My mother's eyes flickered. Harrison leaned forward, amusement in his tone. You're really quitting? What are you going to do? Start your own firm. I met his gaze. That's exactly what I'm going to do. My father slammed his hand on the table. Everything you have, your education, your opportunities came from this family. No, I said firmly. Everything I've accomplished, I earned despite being constantly second-guessed, ignored, and sidelined. Harrison scoffed. You're nothing without the Reynolds name. I smiled. Funny, the name on my new business cards will say Morgan Tech, my mother's maiden name. No one in the industry would connect it to me or to this family. If you leave now, my father said coldly, don't come back. I looked at him, then at the portrait of my grandfather. He had always encouraged me as a child, always told me, if you want to build something new, don't wait for permission. Goodbye, Dad. As I left the boardroom, Harrison followed me down the hall. You're making a mistake, he said, standing in the doorway of my office as I packed a few personal items into a box. You'll be crawling back in 6 months. I walked past him without looking back. We'll see. Claire was already at the elevator, holding her own box. You sure about this? I asked. She grinned. Are you kidding? I'm your number 1 fan. Let's go make something that matters. As the elevator doors closed, I glanced one last time at the company logo etched into the wall, Reynolds & Co., a name that had never truly made room for me. It was time to create a new one. The office was tiny, a sublet in Brooklyn, with flickering lights and a stubborn air conditioner that wheezed more than it cooled. But it was mine. Morgan Tech, named after my mother's side of the family, was nothing but a name on a cheap metal sign at that point. No glossy logos, no polished floors, just a fold-out desk, 2 laptops, and a whiteboard covered in markers and ideas. But it was more than I'd ever had at Reynolds & Co. because here, I had freedom. Claire and I worked 18-hour days. She set up vendor accounts, chased leads, and handled I drafted blueprints for the software suite that would help traditional companies transition into the digital future without tearing down everything they'd already built. not replacement evolution. The first few weeks were rough. I pitched over 30 businesses, and only 2 even bothered to respond. One asked if we did web design. The other ghosted me after requesting a free consultation. But then Breakthrough, a mid-sized logistics firm in Jersey, North Point Freight, was struggling with legacy systems. They'd already been turned down by Reynolds & Co. for being too small to bother with. I showed up with a tailored proposal and no PowerPoint slides, just a demo running on my own laptop. They signed a 3-month pilot. By the end of month 1, their processing time had dropped by 40%. Their warehouse managers who barely used email were now tracking shipments on a clean mobile interface. When I told them it had taken only 4 weeks and 1 part-time engineer to build the whole thing, the CEO blinked twice and said, "Where were you 5 years ago?" Word spread. By month 4, Morgan Tech had outgrown our Brooklyn closet. We upgraded to a small open concept office in Tribeca. We brought on 8 engineers, a project manager, and a UX designer. Clients that had once written me off at Reynolds & Co. were suddenly emailing me directly, unaware that the quiet woman behind Morgan Tech was the same woman who had begged the Reynolds board to modernize a year earlier. Of course, I kept my identity quiet. I signed documents as Samantha Morgan. My LinkedIn was blank. Our company site listed me as founder and strategist, with no photo. Let the software speak for itself. Then came the second big break, a consulting contract with Orion Manufacturing, a client Reynolds & Co. had courted for 3 years without success. Claire looked at me as the deal came in. "You know Harrison's going to explode when he finds out." I shrugged. Let him. Every time Reynolds & Co. lost a client to us, Harrison sent out another company-wide memo preaching loyalty and legacy. A friend inside forwarded me each one. I printed them out and kept them in a drawer marked fuel. The real turning point came in month 6. Claire burst into my office, her phone in hand. "You need to see this." She handed me an article on a financial news site. The headline hit me like a lightning bolt. Reynolds & Co. in trouble? Major clients flee amid calls for modernization. I scanned the story. Phrases like falling behind, stagnation, and outdated systems popped out. But it was the final sentence that made me stop cold. The company is now seeking a chief technology officer to guide a new modernization initiative. Claire pulled up another email. "This just came through our job portal. Executive application." She grinned and turned the screen to me. Harrison Reynolds, the brother who mocked my ideas, who laughed in my face when I resigned, who once told me I'd be nothing without the Reynolds name. "Should I schedule the interview?" Claire asked, barely containing her glee. I stared at the screen, letting it sink in. My brother, my rival, was unknowingly asking for a job at the company I built. "Yes," I said slowly. "Put him on for Monday morning. Same conference room we use for big clients." I smiled. "No, my office." Monday came fast. I arrived at the office an hour early. Old habits die hard, and sat at my desk, looking out over the skyline. It wasn't the 50th floor corner office at Reynolds & Co., but it didn't need to be. This one was mine, earned, designed, built from nothing. At 8:45 a.m., Claire buzzed my intercom. "Your 9 o'clock is here." 15 minutes early. I almost laughed. Harrison used to mock me for arriving early, said it made me look desperate. Now look who's desperate. I murmured to myself. "How does he look?" I asked. Claire hesitated. "No custom-tailored suit. Hair looks thinner. Nervous. Let him wait." I let 10 more minutes pass before opening the door to conference room A. Harrison stood as I entered, his back straight, face composed, but I could see the cracks forming behind his professional smile. The off-the-rack suit, the manila folder clutched a little too tightly. He didn't recognize me at first. "Mr. Reynolds," I said, extending my hand. "Thank you for coming in today." He blinked. "Samantha?" I sat at the head of the table. "Actually, it's Miss Morgan in this building." He stared. This is your company?" I leaned back. "Yes, I'm the founder of Morgan Tech." His jaw tightened. "This is a setup." "No," I replied, flipping open his RSUM. "You applied. We scheduled an interview." "I'm just being professional." He remained standing, flustered. "You don't expect me to work for you. I expect you to interview like anyone else. But full disclosure, this company doesn't believe in nepotism." Harrison's mask cracked. "You're doing this to humiliate me." I shrugged. "I built this place from scratch. Why would I waste time on revenge?" He didn't answer. I read aloud from his application. You're applying for a senior technology strategist role, but it seems a lot of these projects you listed were run by other team members at Reynolds, including me. He sat down finally, his face pale. I set his some aside. Why now, Harrison? Why apply here? He looked down at his hands. Because we're sinking. Reynolds and Co. is losing clients, morale's shot, and the board's panicking. Dad's been sick, he won't admit it, but he's out of touch. And, he hesitated, and you were right. He said it so quietly I almost missed it. Everything you said about modernization, the systems, the clients, you were right. It took him years to admit it, and even now, I could see it hurt his pride, but it was a start. I built this company because no one listened, I told him, because I knew the industry was changing and no one at Reynolds cared. He nodded slowly. I deserve this. I let you walk out the door. We all did. The silence between us felt different this time. Not the silence of dismissal but recognition. Regret. After a beat, he asked, so what now? I studied him. The man who once called me too emotional for tech. The brother who claimed I'd never succeed without our father's name. Now sitting in front of me, humbled. You want to work here? I asked. Fine, but no titles, no special treatment. Entry-level consultant. His eyes widened. Seriously? You'll earn your stripes. You'll work long hours. And you'll report to people a decade younger than you. Can you handle that? He swallowed hard, then nodded. I'll send the contract, I said. Claire will onboard you tomorrow. I stood up and walked to the window. The city buzzed below, alive, restless, constantly evolving. One more thing, I added, turning back. Tell Dad that the CEO of Morgantech wants to meet with the Reynolds and Co. board. Harrison's brows shot up. He'll never go for it. Then his company will keep bleeding clients until it flatlines. I'm giving him a lifeline. He should take it. As he left, I sat down, heart pounding not with fear, but with something else. Power, real power. The kind you don't inherit, the kind you build. The invitation came 3 days later, a formal email from Reynolds and Co.'s board secretary requesting a meeting between the CEO of Morgantech and the Reynolds executive team. No names, no drama, just business. I smiled as I read it. Claire looked up from her laptop. So, are you going to wear something fierce or terrifying? Why not both? I said. The day of the meeting, I chose a slate gray power suit, minimalist, sharp, and tailored to perfection. My heels clicked against the polished marble as I entered the building I'd once called home. Even the security guard who had seen me every day for over a decade did a double take. Miss Reynolds? He said hesitantly. Miss Morgan. I corrected. I'm here for the board meeting. I rode the elevator alone. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored walls, confident, composed, and utterly in control. This time, I wasn't walking into that boardroom to plead for change. I was bringing it with me. As the doors opened, I was met by silence. Then movement. Heads turned. Chairs shuffled. My father sat at the head of the long table. Harrison stood behind him. The others, board members, senior advisors, legal counsel, all looked confused. Some glanced at the door as if expecting someone else to walk in. I placed my briefcase on the table, opened it, and laid out 3 copies of the merger proposal. Good morning, I said. I'm Samantha Morgan, CEO of Morgantech. Let's talk about how we're going to save Reynolds and Co. My father's jaw tightened. This is absurd. You're my daughter, not my competitor. No, I replied calmly. I was your daughter and your employee. Now, I'm a market leader, and your company is weeks from collapse. Harrison stepped in. Dad, just listen. My father ignored him. We built this company on loyalty, tradition, and values, and those values let innovation rot on the vine, I countered. Your refusal to modernize cost you your top 5 clients. Do you want to keep bleeding, or do you want a lifeline? He looked around the table. Not one board member defended him. Their silence was louder than any argument. You're suggesting a buyout? One of the directors asked cautiously. A merger, I corrected. Reynolds and Co. will become a subsidiary under Morgantech's umbrella. You retain brand identity for your legacy clients, but operations, leadership, and strategy will be run through my company. My father stood, his voice shaking with rage. You're humiliating me. I didn't flinch. No, Dad. I'm offering you relevance in a world that left you behind. He sat back down, deflated. His eyes looked tired. older, as if, in that moment, he realized the dynasty he thought he'd protected had slipped out of his control long ago. My mother, seated quietly at the far end of the room, finally spoke. "Richard, maybe it's time to trust her." The room stilled. I'd waited my whole life to hear that from her. With a slow exhale, my father looked back at me. "And what do you want in return?" "I want your signature, your blessing, and your silence." He stared at the papers. The company seal gleamed on the folder like a relic of another age. After what felt like a century, he signed. "Back at Morgantech, Claire popped champagne. "You did it," she said, pouring us each a glass. "You didn't just beat them, you took over." I swirled the glass. "I didn't do it to beat them. I did it so I never had to ask permission again." Later that night, Harrison emailed me a single sentence. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." I didn't reply. "Not yet. Maybe someday." I looked at the framed copy of my resignation letter hanging on my wall. The date felt like a lifetime ago. That was the day they dismissed me. Now, they'd signed the company over to me, and this was only the beginning. 6 months after the merger, Reynolds and Co. had transformed beyond recognition. The stuffy, outdated boardroom was replaced with a sleek, open-floor executive space. The dated cubicles gave way to creative collaboration zones. The workforce had been rejuvenated not by firing everyone over 40, as my father once feared, but by inviting minds of every generation to innovate together. And I, Samantha Morgan, now led the combined empire. Harrison had remained on board, surprisingly humble since the transition. I didn't make it easy for him. He started under the leadership of one of my youngest directors, taking directives from people he once brushed aside, but he did the work quietly, consistently, and for that, I respected him more than I expected to. My father, now fully retired, rarely visited the office. He sent the occasional article my way, or a clipped suggestion written in red ink, as if he were still CEO. I never responded. Some silences are earned. One chilly autumn morning, Claire entered my office with a sealed envelope. "This just came in," she said, placing it on my desk. "No return address." I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. No greeting, no farewell, just one sentence. "Your grandfather would have been proud." I stared at the words longer than I expected. Not because I needed her approval, those days were long gone, but because something in me still needed to know that what I built meant something beyond numbers and valuations. Later that day, I stood in the newly redesigned headquarters lobby, where the portraits of Reynolds family founders used to hang. We'd replaced them with a digital timeline, a living wall that showcased innovation, transformation, and milestones from both Reynolds and Co. and Morgan Tech. At the end of the hallway, a single bronze plaque now read, "In honor of the visionaries who were told no and built it anyway." That night, I attended the annual industry summit. Last year, I'd been barred from the stage, deemed too junior to niche. This year, I was the keynote speaker. As I stepped onto the stage, I looked out into a sea of faces, competitors, clients, media, and in the very back row, my parents, sitting side by side. I used to be known as just the sister. I began, my voice calm and strong. Too emotional, too idealistic, too invisible. But the truth is, invisibility is a gift. It gives you the freedom to observe, to build in silence, to rise without interference. And one day, when no one sees you coming, you arrive, fully formed, unstoppable. The applause was thunderous. Backstage, a young intern approached me, eyes wide with admiration. "How did you do it?" she asked. I smiled. I stopped asking permission. That's when everything changed. A year later, Forbes listed me among the top 10 women reshaping corporate America. 2 years after that, our merged company opened an innovation center in Nairobi, focused on empowering local entrepreneurs. We named it the Reynolds Morgan Initiative. And today, when people say the name Samantha Reynolds Morgan, they don't think just the sister. They think CEO, visionary, architect of an empire. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about crushing your enemies. It's about building something so undeniable, so brilliant, that even they have to stand back and applaud. And the girl they underestimated, she didn't just survive, she rewrote the legacy.